Right, so you think you know pirate battles. You've seen the films, Johnny Depp swinging from a rope, looking all handsome with his eyeliner on. It all looks rather choreographed, doesn't it? A bit of a dance. Well, let me tell you, a real pirate fight wasn't a fucking ballet. It was a messy, terrifying and utterly insane clusterfuck of noise, panic, and people trying very hard not to get a cannonball shoved up their arse. Imagine the worst pub brawl you've ever seen. But on a wobbly floor, everyone's got swords, and the loser gets fed to the sharks. It was pure, unfiltered chaos, fueled by cheap rum and the desperate hope of not dying in the middle of a very big, very wet nowhere. Let's be honest, these weren't trained naval officers with immaculate uniforms and a stiff upper lip. These were the dregs of society, drunks, debtors, and general ne'er-do-wells who thought that a life of scurvy and sudden, violent death was a step up from whatever shithole they'd crawled out of. Their idea of a battle plan was basically point the ship at the other ship and start screaming. There was no noble cause, no fighting for queen and country. It was about one thing and one thing only, getting the other poor sod's stuff. And they were willing to go to some absolutely mental lengths to get it. Forget honour, forget rules, this was fucking business. The sheer noise of it all would have been enough to make your ears bleed. You've got cannons roaring like thunder, wood splintering and screaming as it's torn apart, and men yelling every curse word known to man, probably inventing a few new ones on the spot. It's not a heroic symphony, it's a fucking racket, a cacophony of death. You can't hear yourself think, let alone formulate a witty comeback before you run someone through with a cutlass. This wasn't a duel of wits. It was a screaming match with very, very sharp objects involved. The air would be thick with smoke, salt, and the coppery smell of fear and blood. Absolutely lovely. So when you picture a pirate battle, don't picture a swashbuckling adventure. Picture absolute pants-shitting terror. Picture 100 desperate, angry men, half of them probably seasick, trying to kill each other on a floating piece of wood. It's not romantic, it's not glamorous, it's a fucking nightmare. It's a bunch of blokes who've had a bit too much to drink, deciding that organised violence is the best way to solve their financial problems. And frankly, who can't relate to that a little bit? Still, doesn't make it any less insane. It was the most fucked up office dispute in history. So, how did these floating maniacs actually go about fucking up another ship? It wasn't just a case of sailing up and saying boo. There was a method to the madness, a sort of crude, violent art form. First, you've got the cannons. Big, loud, and ridiculously inaccurate. Firing a cannon on a moving ship at another moving ship was like trying to piss into a bottle during an earthquake. Mostly, you were just making a lot of noise and hoping for the best. The goal wasn't even to sink the other ship. That's just bad business. You can't loot a ship that's at the bottom of the fucking ocean, can you? No. The goal was to fuck it up just enough to make it stop. The real point of the cannon fire was to cause chaos and shred the enemy's rigging. You'd fire chain shot, 2 cannonballs linked by a chain, which would spin through the air like a demonic metal bowlers and tear through sails and ropes. The aim was to cripple the other vessel, turn it into a sitting duck. You'd also load the cannons with grape shot, which is basically a giant shotgun shell. It wouldn't sink the ship, but it would turn the enemy's deck into a fucking meat grinder. It was designed to maim, to injure, to fill the air with screams and take the fight out of the crew before you even stepped aboard. Fucking brutal. While the big guns were doing their thing, every pirate with a steady hand, or at least a hand that wasn't shaking too much from the rum, would be grabbing a musket. These weren't sniper rifles, they were clumsy, slow to reload, and about as accurate as a politician's promise. But you didn't need to be a marksman. You just needed to point it at the crowded deck of the other ship and pull the trigger. Add to that the cheerful throwing of grenades, hollow iron balls filled with gunpowder and a lit fuse, and you've got a recipe for pure, unadulterated pandemonium. It was all about psychological warfare. Make them believe they're already fucked. The whole opening act of the battle was a symphony of destruction designed to break the enemy's will. You're on a merchant ship minding your own business when suddenly this floating hellhole appears. Your sails are torn to ribbons, cannonballs are smashing through your deck, and your mates are being shredded by metal shrapnel. All this before you've even seen the bastards up close. By the time the grappling hooks flew across the gap and bit into your ship's railings, you were probably already thinking that handing over the gold was a much better idea than becoming fish food. And that was the whole fucking point. All right, the ships are tangled together like a pair of pissed-up wrestlers. This is where the real fun begins. Boarding. This wasn't a polite knock on the door. This was a wave of screaming, filthy, heavily armed lunatics pouring over the rails. And what were they armed with? Not just swords. Oh no. They brought an entire toolbox of fucking misery. The cutlass was king, of course. A short, heavy, curved blade, perfect for hacking away in tight spaces. It wasn't a fencing weapon for elegant duels. It was a glorified butcher's knife designed to chop through ropes, wood, and most importantly, people. It was simple, effective, and utterly terrifying. But why have one weapon when you can have fucking loads? Most pirates went into battle looking like a walking arsenal. They'd have a cutlass in one hand, maybe a boarding axe in the other, great for splitting skulls or just smashing through a locked cabin door. Tucked into their belts would be a brace of flintlock pistols. These were single-shot, unreliable pieces of crap, but you didn't need them to be good. You just needed them to go bang once. You'd fire your pistols at close range, drop them, and then get stuck in with the sharp stuff. It was a brutally efficient system of delivering maximum violence in minimum time. The fight itself was a complete shitstorm. It was a swirling, confusing mess of bodies, blades, and splintered wood. You're slipping on blood, tripping over corpses, with the constant roar of shouting and screaming in your ears. There were no battle lines, no formations. It was just a chaotic free-for-all. Every man for himself. You're trying to stab the bloke in front of you, while his mate is trying to cave your head in with a belaying pin. A heavy wooden club. It was ugly, personal, and fucking exhausting. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and you're dead. Simple as that. And the swearing. My God, the swearing. You have to imagine that every single action was accompanied by a torrent of the most creative profanity imaginable. Every sword parry, every gunshot, every axe swing would have been punctuated by a string of curses that would make a sailor blush. This wasn't a silent, stoic affair. It was loud, it was visceral, and it was full of very angry men yelling about what they were going to do to each other's mothers. It was the human element of the battle. The rage and the fear turning into pure, foul-mouthed aggression. Absolutely fucking glorious in a horrifying sort of way. So what's the takeaway from all this? Why are we still morbidly fascinated by these chaotic sea bastards? I think it's because pirate battles represent something we've lost. Pure, unadulterated, balls-to-the-wall insanity. There was no pretense, no bullshit. It was the most honest form of conflict you could possibly imagine. We want your shit, and we are prepared to go to utterly psychotic lengths to get it. You have to admire the simplicity of it, really. It's a level of straightforwardness you just don't see anymore. Today we have contracts and lawyers. They had cannons and axes, much more direct, you've got to admit. Think about the sheer nerve it took to willingly sail a wooden bucket into a storm of iron and lead, all for the chance of scoring some gold and rum. These men weren't just brave, they were fucking mental. They had looked at a sensible life on land with its tedious rules and lack of scurvy and said, no, thanks. I'd rather take my chances with the cannonballs. It's a level of commitment to a bad idea that is almost awe-inspiring. They chose a life that was nasty, brutish, and almost certain to be short. And they did it with a fucking grin on their faces and a bottle of grog in their hand. The battles were the climax of this insane lifestyle choice. They were the ultimate gamble. A few minutes of absolute terror and violence could set you up for months of drunken debauchery, or it could end with you bleeding out on a deck covered in your own entrails. High stakes, you could say. It's this all-or-nothing, fuck-it-all attitude that makes it so compelling. They weren't fighting for an ideology. They were fighting for the weekend. A very, very messy and violent weekend, but the weekend nonetheless. It's the ultimate expression of living in the moment, because tomorrow you'll probably be dead. In the end, pirate battles weren't just fights. They were explosions of pure human chaos. They were what happens when you strip away society, rules and common sense and leave only greed, desperation and a fuck ton of gunpowder. It was a short, spectacular and bloody chapter in human history, a testament to how utterly, beautifully and terrifyingly insane people can be when they're pushed to the edge. So, next time you see a pirate movie, just remember the reality. It was louder, messier, and a hell of a lot more fucking bonkers. And honestly, isn't that so much better?